Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Superintendent Hoffmeister and the Oklahoma State Department of Education, thank you for joining us for the federal programs Lunch and Learn today, October 11th. And we're going to be chatting a little bit about parents' right to know and the qualifications of instructional staff, specifically in our Title I schools or those schools that are receiving Title I funds. We're going to just jump right in with those qualifications, and Matt is going to get us started.
All right, so really before we jump into this specific slide, if you just kind of want to go back to the that one. So I think it's important when we talk about requirements to go back and realize where these requirements come from. I know there's a lot of chatter out there about all of these strings that are attached to federal funding. And so I think it's important to realize that all of these title funds were built out of the Secondary and Elementary Act, ESEA, and that was written in 1965 as a response to a whole lot of things going on in education, namely to combat poverty. That those funds were intended to be supplemental to what states were doing to make sure that the places that had the highest level of need received more resources to meet those needs. And so, you know, a lot of times it's like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. But there are reasons why these requirements are in place, and they are to protect something that historically needed protection and potentially still does. So as we're thinking about that, I think it's helpful for me to be able to explain this when people, you know, ask, why do we have to do this? There are really good reasons that we would protect the most impoverished schools to make sure that teachers in those schools are highly qualified or that meet a high level of qualification. Okay, so with that being said, to the law itself. Okay, so this is sort of the main sort of crux that's going to kind of be the main guiding document for a lot of what's going on here. This basically says that as a state, we have to make sure that all teachers and paraprofessionals, basically instructional personnel that are working to support students in a school supported by federal funds, meets state certification and licensure requirements. Now that includes any of the sort of emergency certification or alt certification, all those different things, but they have to meet a level of state certification and licensure if they're going to teach kids in a Title I school. And so all of this, when we get into specifics moving forward with paraprofessionals and adjuncts and all these different things, kind of stem from this main idea that if you're a Title I school, your teachers, the people working with kids in an instructional way, have to meet certifications. So moving on to specifically paraprofessionals.
Okay, so with paraprofessionals, similar statement in the SL law is that the state has professional standards for paraprofessionals working in a program supported with funds under this part. So those, again, are our Title I schools. We know those requirements to be the Tier 1 paraprofessional requirements, which are attached to Job Code 414. So Oklahoma paraprofessionals must have a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent and meet one of the following qualifications. So they have completed at least 2 years of study at an institution of higher education, as completion of 48 semester hours of college coursework, or have obtained an associate's degree or higher, or have taken and passed the various tests, work keys, parapro test, or the OGET. So these are our current qualifications for paraprofessionals. And the special education is Tier 2. So this is in addition to that Tier 1 criteria. But all paraprofessionals working in our Title I schools should hold tier 1 or tier 2 qualifications. And if they are new, so all newly employed paraprofessionals would have a certificate from the State Department. So if they were previously employed and you've had them around for a while, you would be tracking those credentials and that they've met those requirements. But if they are new, the state is now tracking that. And just a special note with SPED paraprofessionals that if you cannot identify a tier 2 certified, you can hire a tier 1 and work to get them tier 2 certified, but there is no criteria like that for tier 1. When they sign on to be a tier 1 paraprofessional, they should meet those requirements. So for our paraprofessionals, I'm just going to go back to the screen one more time. And that is that high school diploma, that 48 hours or associate's degree or one of those tests. Those are the qualifications here in Oklahoma. Okay. And we will let Matt attack adjuncts.
All right, so there's been a lot of questions that have come out over the last couple of months around adjuncts. Historically, we've had adjuncting that have been, it's been allowed to have a limited number of hours where you have somebody come in that maybe has field experience or has some other level of experience, but doesn't necessarily have a degree. And those people are allowed to come in and teach a course or teach a couple of courses. I think there were limits and there's still, we've got to look at all the new details and everything, but there were limits on how much historically that person could teach in a school day. With the new adjuncting law, that sort of expanded some of that. It allowed for some additional people to be able to be involved in that, recognizing that we have sort of a teacher shortage here, that there may be circumstances where somebody that has experience out in the real world may be able to come in and do a good job teaching kids in schools. However, because of what I said before, because these title funds have these expectations that adjuncts meet, or that all teachers and paraprofessionals meet state certification requirements, and the fact that so far the state law does not grant adjuncts a teacher certification, it merely waives that requirement to be able to be in a class. It does not meet the basic requirements under ESEA in order to be funded with federal funds. In addition to that, we feel that having an adjunct at a Title I school does not meet that overall expectation at all, because any teacher would need to have certification. Now, we're not going to be able to reimburse and things like that, but at the end of the day, that is putting your district in some hot water if you've got an adjunct that doesn't have a teaching certification there. Now, you may have an adjunct that's out of, has some sort of other certification that's teaching out of their certification area and things like that. And there's some ways to get emergency certified and all those different things. But if you just have a straight adjunct in a Title I school, that places your district in a place where you could be in a place where you're not meeting that overarching requirement to have all teachers be certified. So.
Okay, I will just mention that I threw the presentation into the chat so that you have it, but do we have any questions right now just about those qualifications of instructional staff, specifically in regard to those funded with Title I? Okay, I'm gonna move right on to parent right to know.
Okay, so another one of the protections in the law is to say that, if you've got a kid, you're a parent, and you have a kid that's attending a school that has an elevated level of need, whether that's due to poverty or other measures, that you have a right as a parent to know if your child is being taught by somebody that is not qualified to teach that course or certified to teach that course. So every district is required at the beginning of the year to send out notification, or a parent's right to know letter, And it can be a digital format, it can be in part of the enrollment packets, but you have to notify parents that they have a right to request the qualifications of the teacher of their student. And they've got several, and that as a district, in a timely manner, you will respond with that information. So that's the first part of parents' right to know, that you have to send it out, notify parents that they have a right to ask about their teachers, their child's teacher's qualifications. This is also the part of the law, by the way, where you have to send out student test scores and talk, make sure that you share sort of their progress meeting state standards and so on. So that's also in that area. So at a minimum, parents are allowed to request the if the teacher has met state qualifications and licensing, if the teacher is teaching under an emergency certification, and if they're teaching in the field or discipline that they were trained in, and if their child is provided services by a paraprofessional, what are their qualifications? So once again, all teachers, all paraprofessionals have to have a certification. So parents have a right to know the level of certification, the level of experience of those teachers teaching their kiddos. Okay. All right. So that is just a generic sort of thing that you need to do every single year. You send that out to all parents that they are set up. There is a secondary portion, which I think is helpful to sort of refer to this as the 4-week notification, or many people will call it the 4-week letter. In addition to this, so districts are required in a timely notice to give timely notice that a student has been taught for 4 or more consecutive weeks by a teacher who does not meet applicable state certification or licensing requirements at the grade level and subject area which the teacher has been assigned. So they may have a different level of certification and they're teaching out of that area, or they may be, in this case, if they had been an adjunct and, you know, this is before we sort of got more stuff, you've got this in there, or you have somebody that you've got a long-term sub, you've got all these things where you have a student that is being taught by somebody not certified in the grade level and subject area of that student. You're required in a timely manner after 4 weeks to send that letter out. So there are.
So the question in the chat,
Yeah.
that they sent the notification letters and the adjunct teachers couldn't be paid out of federal funds. Is it okay that they are paid with general funds?
So what I would say is that's the only way that they would, probably the only way that they would be able to be paid. However, what we're saying is if they're in a Title I school, we don't feel like that meets the requirements under the law to be able to pay them even with state and local funds if they're in a Title I school. They would need to have some form of certification, even if it's a paraprofessional certification, that at least provides some sort of foundation for us to be able to work from, to be able to show and be able to answer these questions to parents and to potential auditors as well. So what this means is in any circumstance, you basically have to check the certification of those teachers. Are they teaching students in the grade level or subject area? Now, there have been some questions about charter schools, so probably should address that in this case as well. The charter school law allows flexibility for charter schools to have teachers that are not certified in the grade level and subject area and be able to teach those. That gives them the flexibility to have kids be taught by teachers outside of their certification area for flexibility of services and all sorts of things of that regard. However, that law does not grant them this level of grade level and subject area certification. So for instance, if you have a high school biology teacher teaching a 5th grade, math class, if the charter school waiver of allowing for those certifications does not then give that biology teacher a certification in 5th grade math. It allows them to teach there. So this federal requirement would still apply to notify parents within 4 weeks that their child is being taught by a teacher outside of that grade level requirement. So
Go ahead.
I believe, so emergency certification, I think, still qualifies as a certification for the purposes. So because it is an avenue for the state to actually certify that teacher to teach that space, then yes, that would count as being certified. The term highly qualified is sort of an outdated term. It's sort of a no child left behind thing, but if we want to like talk about like lowercase highly qualified, that's kind of what we're talking about with certification and licensure. That's kind of the thing there. So we've got that with emergency certification.
So I'm just gonna, since this is what we're talking about, I'm gonna pull this slide back up. So what it says in the ESSA law is that teachers and paraprofessionals working in programs supported with these funds, so supported with title funds, meet applicable state certification and licensure requirements. So teachers and paraprofessionals need to be certified and licensed. Adjunct is not a certification or a licensure. It's just permission to teach in Oklahoma. And so what we're saying is that we don't feel like in a Title I school that meets this criteria.
It is our understanding that this would apply to all title funds, but we don't do a lot with Title VI Indian education funds. So I would reach out to that department as well for more clarification on what's allowed in those grants. Other questions on parents' right to know or 4-week letters?
So the question in the chat is, if we have no other applicants and have adjuncts in Title I school, what happens? So one, what we know that you absolutely need to do is be sending that 4-week notification. Okay, so you have to tell the teachers that the person that's teaching their class is not certified. And then I would just do your best to come into compliance. But we can have a conversation about like the situation that's happening in your school and what we can do to work towards, like I said, coming into compliance. There's a similar issue, for example, with paraprofessionals when we have that 413 job code. We would not want a paraprofessional, that job code 413 in a Title I school. Okay, so we would want to move towards eliminating those positions if it's a Title I school. So it's kind of the same situation. We want all of your instructional staff, all of your teachers and your paraprofessionals to meet those certification and licensure requirements, which is the new requirement in ESSA from the highly qualified and No Child Left Behind.
Okay, so we've got a couple of other questions. So we talked about the, what to do there. I would just document that as well. If your emergency certification is in the area, then I would say no, it wouldn't require a 4-week notification. Now, the other aspect is a parent has a right to request, and you do have to provide them an answer if they want to know the level of certification. So you would have to tell the parent that person is emergency certified, even if you're not sending out that letter. So if a parent requests it, you still have to provide that information. If you have an adjunct, that's one of the recommendations that we have just moving forward, because we know this is a challenge that I would do your best to at least get your adjuncts para certification, level 1 or level 2, to be able to at least show that you've got that in there. For targeted assistance, there's still funds going to that school. In general, with targeted assistance, it's really focused to those specific kiddos. So I would say definitely not teaching those specific kids. So you may have a little bit of more flexibility there to work with that. But I still think the umbrella, you've got a school that's being served with these funds. In addition, Title II and Title IV and all those other funds that are also a part of ESEA. I still think you're kind of in a precarious situation with that. We can share the PowerPoint again.
Yes, we can. We're working on that. Okay, I want to make sure we have all the questions answered. I do have a little bit of extra information just about paraprofessional credentials in that process, but your questions about the certification of staff are priority over that information. So if you have a question, please feel free to post that in the chat, either in a personal message or to the group. And you can also feel free to come off mute and ask your question out loud if you want. Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to just move right on into the paraprofessional credentialing. So like I said before, the paraprofessional credentialing has kind of changed. And so paraprofessionals that were working in your schools prior to this year, you would be tracking that they meet those qualifications. But moving forward, all new paras or paras that change positions should have that Title I or SPED Tier 1 or Tier 2 qualification. So it's the traditional criteria to obtain Tier 1, and then the Tier 2 is a SPED trained designation. If a Tier 2 applicant is not available, remember we talked about that the district can hire a Tier 1 with an allowed 120 calendar days to obtain the Tier 2 credential. These credentials, again, are listed here, and that is that secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, have completed at least 2 years of study, or have obtained an associate's degree, have taken or passed one of these tests. So they have to meet those requirements. And the new credentialing are going to go through they're going to do the SPR application, and they're going to get an actual credential that comes from the State Department of Education. So what that looks like is the application has to be initiated by district staff, so by the superintendent or the person in HR in the educator credentialing system. So there is a specific spot that's called Manager Paraprofessional Credentials in that district login. Application will require an upload of those supporting documentation. After that has taken place, the paraprofessional that's applying for the credential will then complete the process. So the district has to start the process, and then it has to be finished up by the paraprofessional. Once the credential is complete and approved, nothing comes in the mail. You would be able to access that information on the district side in the credentialing system. But in order to get a certificate, for your paraprofessional to get one, they would log into their credentialing system. They can click to view their paraprofessional certificate, and they will have a certificate there that they can print, but that's not going to come to you or be received in the mail. So again, the process has to be initiated at the district level under the manager paraprofessional credentials. It will require an upload. After that happens, the paraprofessional applying for the credential can log in and get a copy of their credential, and that credential could be shared if a paraprofessional moved from one district to another. Okay, so we have a few more questions. Okay, no, Matt already answered it. Perfect. So just a couple other reminders. We have about 5 minutes. If you have any questions, again, feel free to come off mute or place those in the chat. I just want to remind you that applications are due on Monday, October 17th. The consolidated application is due. We will have kind of an office hour, or our application training series. We're just open for technical assistance tomorrow and Friday from 10 to 11. The link is exactly the same from those other trainings that we had that were specific to applications. But if you are struggling to get something verified, or through that consistency check, or you just need support with one portion of your application, please feel free to log on with us from 10 to 11 tomorrow and Friday, so that we can get those applications submitted by Monday. Just a reminder that your reviewer is going to be your first best resource for information. After you've reached out to that person, you can always feel free to contact myself or Matt or Rick, and we'd be happy to help you. But that reviewer is the one that's going to be looking over that information and can really provide you the best insight. Okay, what other questions do we have with just these last 5 minutes left?
Michelle, it's Kathy. Is there a known kind of glitch in SPR validating with site codes? My problem is in 723, but I wondered if it was a common deal.
Sometimes if there are multiple sites and multiple job codes, the validation can kind of get confused. And so sometimes we have to go and override those errors if we can verify that everything's correct. So I would just check that it's correct, and then maybe we can partner up with our office to validate that.
Okay. Thank you.
There is, so someone in the chat just asked where they can see your reviewers. There is a list on our website. There have been a few changes, so we'll try to get that updated. But for the most part, it is correct. We've had a few changes in our program managers, and we've added a new reviewer, Kendall. The other place that you can see it is when you click on the application to the right, there's a section that's called review. You can click that button and it will show who your application is assigned to there. But always feel like you can shoot us an email and we'll get you the name of your reviewer if you can't find it. And remember that I lost my train of thought. Really just happens sometimes, doesn't it? I don't know what I was going to say, but your reviewer can help you, and we'll get that list updated for you. Would it be possible to have a written FAQ on adjuncts? I think that's a great idea.
It's one of those things that with the new law, like we've been getting a ton of questions about it, and there are so many like individual sort of situations with it that we kind of, and we wish we would have been able to get out better information early on, but just the timing of when the law came out and when the school year started, it was kind of crazy. So we'll try to get some more clarification with that. Resources will link to different regs and different parts of the law to make sure that you can see. It's the general for reviewers is the general information tile.
I remembered what I was going to say. I was going to tell you that your Office of Federal Programs reviewer will have your consolidated application, your CARES, your Gear CARES, your SR2, 793, and 794. If you have one of those other grants like 723, 724, or a grant from 21st Century or some other program, those are going to have separate reviewers. But your consolidated app and those Primary ESSER applications, those will have the same reviewer in our office. And as Matt said, it is on the general portion or the general information tile. And for those of you that is a little bit different, we'll try to get a new one posted this week. Making a post-it, that's how things get done in my office. So I'm going to update the reviewer list. Okay, we only have 1 short minute left, so we'd be happy to entertain a question, or we will just look forward to seeing those of you that need help with your applications, or just looking through to chat through some of your application tomorrow and Friday. Those of you that need to meet the maintenance of equity provision should have received an email, and we'll be walking through that tomorrow and Thursday. So make sure to join us or send me an email if you need information on that. And we hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and we will look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much, everybody.